He stood up for me, in front of everyone, and I do not know whether to thank him or fear what it will cost him. That one moment changed everything. Harriet had done nothing wrong. She had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time. But in Munich in 1810, that was enough. One false rumor, spoken loudly at the right dinner table, could close every door a woman had. And someone had just spoken it. Then the most powerful man in that room did something nobody expected. He did not send a quiet letter. He did not use back channels. He stood up, in front of every nobleman and noblewoman at that table, and he said her name like it was something worth protecting. He gave up something precious to do it, something he could not get back. The question is, why? A man like Friedrich did not make moves without reason. He had everything to lose and nothing obvious to gain. So what was he really doing? Stay with us, because the answer will surprise you. This story is a work of fiction. The characters, names, and specific events portrayed in this production are entirely imaginary and are not intended to represent any real person, living or deceased. The historical setting, social customs, and legal systems referenced, including Regency-era Bavaria and the entailment system of 1810, are based on genuine historical research and are included purely for educational context. All cultural references in this production are made with full respect for the people, traditions, and histories they represent. This story does not seek to stereotype or cause offense to any nationality, culture, or community. The red flag warnings included in this story are for educational purposes only and are not intended as professional advice of any kind. This production is suitable for general audiences. It contains no graphic violence, no explicit content, and no material intended to distress viewers of any age. Historical facts have been included in good faith to provide context and educational value. Viewers who wish to learn more are encouraged to explore the Regency period through reputable historical sources. Viewer discretion is advised for younger audiences. Munich, 1810. Germany. In this city, your name was everything. Lose it, and you lost everything with it. The people who ran Munich's upper society were called the Bavarian Adel, the nobility. They had strict rules about who could speak to whom, who could marry whom, and who was considered worthy of being in the same room as whom. These rules were not written in any book, but everyone knew them, and everyone followed them. Breaking them had consequences. At the very top of this world sat Friedrich, the Duke of Steinfeld. His family had held land, titles, and power in Bavaria for generations. Noblemen straightened their backs when he walked in. Women lowered their fans. Even men who had their own titles spoke carefully around him. But Friedrich had a problem, and it was getting worse by the day. His grandfather had done something that seemed sensible in 1763, but had become a trap by 1810. He had placed a legal condition on the entire Steinfeld estate, the land, the properties, the money, all of it. This condition was called an entailment. It meant that Friedrich could not simply decide who would inherit what he owned. The entailment decided for him. And the entailment said this: if Friedrich reached his 35th birthday without a legitimate son, everything, the estate, the properties, the family wealth, would pass directly to his distant cousin, Baron Kellner. Not because Kellner deserved it. Not because Kellner was capable of running it. Simply because the legal document said so, and in 1810, a legal document signed by a dead man still had more power than a living duke. Now, if you watch shows like Bridgerton or Downton Abbey, you will have seen entailments used as dramatic plot devices. A woman cannot inherit. A cousin is set to take everything. The family scrambles. But here is what those shows do not always show you. In real Regency-era Europe, an entailment was not just a dramatic inconvenience. It was an iron door with no key. Lawyers had tried for decades to find ways around them. Most failed. The courts almost always sided with the original document. Friedrich had been told by 3 separate lawyers that his grandfather's entailment was airtight. He had 12 months left. So Friedrich did what any man in his position was expected to do. He began looking for a wife. His advisors gave him 3 names. 3 women from suitable families with the right bloodlines and the right social standing. All 3 were available. All 3 were appropriate. All 3 would solve his problem neatly if he moved quickly and did nothing foolish. Then he walked into the Grunwald Assembly Hall and stopped paying attention to all 3 of them. Harriet had not come to Munich by choice. Her father, Viscount Vane, had been posted there for diplomatic work on behalf of the English crown. When a viscount travels abroad for official duties, his unmarried daughter does not stay behind in London alone. That was not how things were done. So Harriet came. She was not here to find a husband. She was not here to be seen. She was here because her father's obligations had brought her here, and she had accepted that with the quiet practicality of someone who had learned early that the world did not often ask young women what they preferred. She kept to herself. She attended the social gatherings she was required to attend. She was polite to everyone and close to no one. This was not coldness. This was survival. She had watched enough women in London get caught in the machinery of gossip and social competition to know that the safest thing a woman in her position could do was remain unremarkable. She almost managed it. The first time Friedrich appeared near her, she thought it was coincidence. The second time, she was less sure. By the 5th time, she knew it was not coincidence at all. He began appearing at the same morning promenades along the Isar River where she walked with her maid. He took a seat near her at a recital she attended. He arrived at a diplomatic reception 2 hours early and was already in the room when she came in. He never said anything inappropriate. He never crossed any line that could be formally reported. He was, in the technical language of 1810 propriety, perfectly behaved. But Harriet felt it. The weight of being watched. The subtle impossibility of moving away from someone whose rank meant that every room automatically arranged itself around him. When the Duke of Steinfeld stood near you, you could not simply walk to the other side. Other people noticed. Questions were asked. The very act of moving away could itself become a talking point. This is the first thing to understand about what Friedrich was doing, even if he did not fully understand it himself. His attention may have felt, to him, like interest, like admiration. But for Harriet, it felt like a wall closing in. He was using his position without realizing, or perhaps without caring, that she had no comfortable way to refuse it. That is not devotion. That is pressure wearing the clothes of devotion. And it was about to get much more complicated. It started with a dinner. Baron Fleischer hosted it at his residence near the Marienplatz, one of those formal evenings where the food was secondary and the conversations were the real business. The right people were there. The wrong ones were not invited. And everyone at the table understood that what was said in that room would travel far beyond it by morning. Harriet sat near the middle of the table. She had said little all evening. She had eaten carefully, responded when spoken to, and done everything correctly. She was doing what she always did, being present without being noticed. Then Gräfin Oldenhof spoke. The Gräfin was the kind of woman who had spent decades collecting information about other people and knew exactly when to use it. She set down her wine glass, looked at no one in particular, and remarked, in a voice pitched just loud enough to reach the 4 nearest tables, that she understood the English Viscount's daughter had been seen in connection with the Duke of Steinfeld's private carriage on Tuesday afternoon. She left the sentence there. She did not add anything. She did not need to. The table went quiet. Here is something important to understand about reputation in 1810, because popular drama does not always get this right. In shows and films set in this period, a ruined reputation is often shown as something dramatic, a public confrontation, a revealed letter, a witnessed kiss, something visible, something that looks like evidence. The reality was far quieter and far more brutal than that. In 1810 Bavaria, as across most of Regency Europe, a woman's reputation could be damaged by nothing more than a sentence. Not a proven fact, not a witnessed event, just a sentence, spoken by someone with enough social standing to make people take it seriously. There was no way to fight it in court. There was no newspaper that would print a correction. There was no process for proving a negative. If the Gräfin Oldenhof of Munich said something about you at Baron Fleischer's dinner table, it was as good as printed. By the next morning, the story would have traveled to every household that mattered, and it would arrive already shaped, already carrying the tone the Gräfin had given it. The truth of what had actually happened on Tuesday was this. Harriet had been traveling in a hired carriage with her maid, returning from an errand near the Marienplatz. Friedrich's carriage had been on the same street, moving in the same direction. His coachman had drawn briefly alongside, a matter of seconds, not minutes, before both carriages continued separately on their way. Nothing had been said. Nothing had happened. It had lasted perhaps 4 minutes. 4 minutes was more than enough. Harriet understood all of this before the Gräfin had finished her sentence. She did not panic. Panic would have been visible, and visible reactions at a dinner table became part of the story. Instead, she felt something cold settle in her chest, a precise, controlled fear. The kind that comes not from surprise but from recognition. She had always known this city could turn on her. She had always known that her position here was fragile. She had simply hoped to get through the season without giving it a reason to. She kept her eyes on her plate. She kept her hands still. She breathed. She knew one thing with absolute certainty. Arguing would make it worse. Defending herself would look like guilt. Showing distress would become the next evening's conversation. The only correct response, by the rules of this world, was silence and composure. So she gave it. What she could not control was what happened next. Now, here is the second thing to pay close attention to, because this is where the story becomes genuinely complicated. Friedrich had options. He could have stayed silent, let the moment pass, used his connections quietly over the following days to cool the rumor before it spread further. This was the sensible path, the strategic path. It would have protected Harriet well enough, and it would have cost him nothing. His search for a suitable wife could have continued without interruption. The entailment clock would keep running, and he would still have time. He did not choose the sensible path. When a powerful person has a safe, easy way to handle something, and they choose not to take it, watch that carefully. It can mean they have grown into someone who puts another person's dignity above their own comfort. It can also mean they are making a calculated move that looks generous on the surface. At this moment in the story, the honest answer is that nobody at that table, including Harriet, knew which one this was. Friedrich stood up, not quickly, not with any visible emotion. He rose from his chair with the unhurried certainty of a man who has already decided, placed his napkin on the table, and looked at the Gräfin with an expression that carried no anger in it at all, which was, somehow, more serious than anger would have been. He said, in a level voice that every person at that table heard clearly, Lady Harriet Vane travelled this city in a hired carriage with her maid in attendance, as is entirely proper. Those who speak carelessly about her speak carelessly about me. I trust that is understood. Then he sat back down. The dinner continued. But every person in that room understood that something had just happened that could not be taken back. Friedrich had attached his name to hers. Publicly. Without lawyers. Without formal process. Without the careful preparation that a man in his position should have used. He had said it. It was done. And Harriet, still looking at her plate, felt the cold fear in her chest shift into something she could not immediately name. By the following morning, the consequences had already begun. Friedrich's advisers heard what had happened at Baron Fleischer's dinner before he had finished his breakfast. His steward came in with the Morning Post and a carefully neutral expression that told Friedrich everything he needed to know before a single word was spoken. The three women his advisors had identified, the suitable ones, the ones with the right family names and the right connections to solve the entailment problem, had each, through their own separate channels, made their position quietly clear. Two had already accepted invitations to other engagements for the remainder of the season. The third had simply stopped being available. Friedrich's clock was still running. He had not gained a single day. He had, in the space of one dinner, made his year considerably harder. His advisor placed the Morning Post on the desk and waited. Friedrich looked at it for a moment. Then he picked up a pen, wrote 4 words on a single sheet of paper, folded it, and handed it to a footman for delivery to the Vane residence near the Englischer Garten. The note said, "I am still sorry." Nothing else. No explanation. No request. No flattery. Just that. Harriet read it twice at her writing desk. She was not a woman who trusted quickly. She had not survived 2 years in Munich's social world as the daughter of a foreign diplomat with no local alliances, by taking people at face value. She had learned to look past what people said and watch what they did instead. And what she knew about Friedrich, up to this point, was that he was a man with a legal problem and a deadline. She knew his advisors had been actively searching for a solution. She was not unaware of how these things worked. So she sat with the note and she thought carefully. The gratitude was there. She would not pretend otherwise. What he had done at that dinner had been real, and it had carried genuine weight. The Gräfin Oldenhof did not retreat from things easily. The fact that the rumor had not spread further by morning was directly connected to what Friedrich had said the night before. She understood that. But understanding it and trusting it were two different things entirely. A man could do a good thing for a complicated reason. A man could protect someone and also be calculating about what that protection might eventually return to him. She had seen that pattern before. The powerful person who steps in at the right moment, creates a sense of obligation, and then waits. Gratitude, over time, can quietly become debt. And debt, in the world of the Bavarian Adele, always eventually came due. She placed the note inside her writing case, beneath the false bottom where she kept the things she was not yet ready to decide about. Then she closed the case. She did not reply. Now here is something worth knowing, because it changes how you weigh what Friedrich did. In the early 19th century across Regency Europe, a nobleman who publicly attached his name to a woman outside the formal process of engagement was not simply being romantic. He was placing his own social standing into the same conversation as hers. If her reputation was later confirmed as damaged, whether fairly or not, his name would carry some of that damage too. His word had now vouched for her character in front of witnesses. If he was later shown to have been wrong, or if the story grew more complicated, he would share in the consequence. This was not a small thing. Men of Friedrich's rank did not do this casually. The historical record of this period shows clearly that powerful men in Regency Europe almost always handled reputation matters for women through private channels, quiet pressure applied behind closed doors, with no public record and therefore no public risk to themselves. To stand up at a dinner table and say it openly was, by the standards of 1810, unusual. It was the kind of move that could not be easily explained away as strategy, because good strategy would never have been that exposed, which means one of two things. Either Friedrich had stopped calculating, or he had started calculating differently. Most people watching this will recognize something in this moment, not from history, but from their own lives. Most of us have been in a situation where someone could have stood up for us quietly, through the back door, in a way that cost them nothing. And we have also known moments when someone chose to do it openly instead, loudly, on the record, in a room full of people, knowing full well that it attached their name to yours. When that happens, it changes something. Not immediately, not with a rush of feeling, But slowly, in the quiet hours afterward, when you are sitting at your desk reading a 4-word note that says nothing except the most necessary thing. Harriet had not replied. But she had not thrown the note away either. It was inside the writing case, beneath the false bottom, next to the things she was not yet ready to decide about. That gap, between keeping something and acting on it, is where the most important decisions in a person's life tend to live. What she would do next, nobody could say with certainty. Not yet. But one thing had changed that could not be unchanged. She had stopped asking whether Friedrich's action was genuine. She had started asking whether she was brave enough to believe it. 3 days after the dinner, Harriet replied. Not with a long letter. Not with an explanation or a list of conditions. She sent one sentence, written in plain, careful handwriting on a single sheet of paper. It said, "I do not know what you want from me, but I know what you gave up, and I have not forgotten it." That was all. Friedrich read it once. Then he set it down on his desk and sat very still for a long moment. Not relieved. Not triumphant. Still. The kind of stillness that comes when someone has said something true about you, clearly and without softening it, and you have no argument to offer because they are right. She had not said yes to him. She had not said no. She had done something harder than both. She had been honest. Over the weeks that followed, the rumor faded. Not because anyone proved it false. No formal correction was ever made. In 1810, there was no process for that. It faded because Friedrich made it his business to ensure it did. Quietly, through his connections, applying the kind of pressure that men of his rank could apply without ever raising their voice. The people who had started repeating the story found reasons to stop. That is how reputation repair worked in Regency Europe. It did not require truth. It required power used with intention. Here is the historical fact that matters most. In this period, powerful men almost never did this without expecting a clear return. A formal engagement. A legal arrangement. Something documented and signed. To use your rank to protect a woman's name and ask for nothing confirmed in writing first. That was genuinely rare. Not romantic in the way stories make it sound. Rare in the way that things are rare when they go against every practical instinct a person in that position has been trained to follow. Friedrich had done exactly that. And Harriet's one sentence had told him she understood it completely. This story carries 3 lessons that go beyond 1810 Bavaria. They are just as true today. The first lesson is this: attention that ignores your comfort is not devotion. It does not matter how powerful the person giving it is. If you have no comfortable way to say no, then what is being offered to you is not care. It is pressure. Know the difference. The second lesson is this: real sacrifice costs something real. Friedrich did not give up something small at that dinner table. He gave up time he did not have, and options he could not easily replace. If a choice costs a person nothing, it is not sacrifice. Watch what someone gives up, not what they say they are willing to give up. The third lesson is this: trust is not built by words. It is built by actions that cannot be taken back. Friedrich could not unsay what he said at that table. Harriet could not unwrite what she sent in that note. Both of them chose to do something permanent. That is what made it real. 3 people in every 10 who watch a story like this will recognize someone they know in Friedrich's early behavior. And that recognition matters, because the earlier you see it, the more choices you still have. Thank you for watching this story with us today. If it stayed with you, please subscribe to our channel so you do not miss the next one. There are more stories coming, and every one of them has something worth knowing. I created this story because history has a way of making the past look simpler than it actually was. We see the grand estates, the formal dinners, the polished titles, and we assume the people inside them had everything under control. They did not. This narrative was inspired by the real legal and social pressures of Regency-era Bavaria in 1810. During this period, the Bavarian Adel, the nobility, operated under a strict system where your family name was not just a matter of pride. It was a legal instrument. It determined what you could own, who you could marry, and what would happen to everything you had built the moment you stepped outside the rules. The entailment system I referenced in this story was entirely real. Families across Europe in the early 19th century lived under legal conditions set by men who had been dead for decades. A grandson could lose his entire inheritance not because of anything he had done wrong, but simply because a document written before his birth said so. That kind of pressure changes how people make decisions. It changes what they are willing to sacrifice and what they are willing to do to protect what little control they still have. I wanted to explore Friedrich not as a powerful man with all the answers, but as someone caught between duty and something he had not planned for. The entailment gave him a deadline. The rules of his society gave him a narrow path. And then one honest woman stepped into his world and made the narrow path feel unbearable. What stayed with me most, when researching this period, was how little space women like Harriet actually had. She had done nothing wrong. She had broken no rule. And yet one sentence from the right person at the right dinner table was enough to threaten everything. There was no court of appeal. There was no correction process. There was only the question of whether someone with enough power thought she was worth standing up for. That question is not just historical. Most people watching this will have faced a version of it. Perhaps not in a Bavarian dining hall, but in a workplace, a community, a family gathering. The moment when someone could have spoken up for you and chose to stay quiet. Or the moment when they did speak, loudly, on the record, at real cost to themselves, and you had to decide what to do with that. This story is a reminder that real sacrifice does not announce itself. It does not arrive with a speech or a grand gesture. Sometimes it arrives as a man standing up quietly from a dinner table and saying 4 words that cannot be taken back. True strength, in 1810 as today, was never about what a person owned or what title they carried. It was always about what they were willing to give up and who they were willing to give it up for.